The vents were rattling, the fluorescent tubes hummed in uneven pulses, and a cold draft seeped from the stairwell that had been welded shut for nearly 30 years. The janitor's statement began at 6:12 a.m., the time he claimed he found the cassette. It sat alone on the floor of the staff break room, placed carefully in the center of a paper towel as if someone didn't want to touch it directly. No note, no footprints on the waxed tile. The school had been empty overnight. Cameras in that wing hadn't worked since the budget cuts of 2017. The label on the tape was the part that forced the principal to call the district office. Basement, EO2 1425, 01:03 a.m. The basement had been sealed in 1995 after the boiler collapse. An inspection report noted structural instability, standing water, and an unresolved electrical hazard. The entrance stairwell was closed with a steel plate and 4 industrial welds signed by the city engineer. Those welds remained perfectly intact when staff were sent to check. By mid-morning, the district dispatched an operations consultant and a retired facilities inspector to examine the tape. They brought a portable deck, dust masks, and gloves, expecting mold. Instead, the tape was warm to the touch, as if it had been recorded minutes earlier. The magnetized strip showed no signs of aging or humidity, no warping, no dust. It was cleaner than any cassette stored in a school building had a right to be. When they pressed play, the deck's internal motor slowed for a second, as though compensating for a heavy signal. Then a low, wet echo filled the room. Water dripping on metal, something shifting in the distance. Voices weren't clear, too far away, buried in interference, but one word kept surfacing through static. Down. The consultant paused the tape and rewound 5 seconds. The sound repeated. A scrape, like a desk leg dragged across concrete, then the same distorted whisper. A map of the building from 1994 was pulled from archives. The sealed basement, according to the blueprint, held a mechanical room, a storage corridor, and a long-disused maintenance office. Only one camera had ever been installed there, and its cable had been severed during the collapse. The footage from its last day was archived on microfilm, but never digitized. The team reviewed that reel in the library's projection room. Most of it showed empty halls, occasional dust drifting past the lens. But the final frame, just before the collapse alarm, captured a faint reflection moving across the far wall. Not a person, more like a shape briefly interrupting light that shouldn't have been there. Investigators in 1995 had marked it as inconclusive artifact. The new tape's audio seemed to come from that same location. The principal authorized the consultant to continue listening in a controlled environment. The second minute contained a short burst of feedback, followed by a clatter, as if something metallic, possibly a tool, fell close to the recorder. A cough echoed afterward, dry, human, unmistakable. But there was no way in or out of that basement. At 11:23 a.m., a decision was made to send maintenance to inspect the welds. All 4 marks, dated and initialed by the city engineer, were still present. No grinding, no heat scoring, no tampering, no smudges on the plate, no dust disturbed around the bolts. Nothing indicated recent access. Yet the tape existed, and whoever held the recorder had been breathing in that sealed darkness less than 24 hours earlier. The tape deck clicked. A thin whine rose from inside the machine, the kind that usually means the motor is fighting uneven tension. The operations consultant kept one finger on the pause button, while the retired inspector leaned closer, tracking each shift in the static as if it were a breathing pattern. The room smelled of old carpet and whiteboard cleaner. A guidance poster about exam stress fluttered every time the HVAC kicked in. None of it belonged with the sound bleeding from the speakers, thick, cavernous, and too open for a place that had been buried under concrete since the Clinton administration. At 12 seconds in, the right channel filled with faint, rhythmic taps, not footsteps, more like someone testing metal with a knuckle, checking for hollow spots. The pattern repeated twice, paused, then shifted a few feet to the left mic. The inspector's jaw tightened. He knew the acoustic signature of a narrow corridor. The consultant took notes, marking each spike in the audio. But something else bothered him. The delay between the taps and their echo. It was longer than it should have been for a small basement, longer than the blueprint allowed. He replayed the segment 3 times without saying a word. Then the breathing returned. It was closer now. Steady, nasal, controlled. Whoever held the recorder seemed to be facing an open room. You could hear fabric shifting against plastic, a zipper brushing the mic, a slight adjustment of grip, the kind of movement someone makes when they raise a camera or flashlight. At the 40-second mark, a new sound emerged. Water sliding across concrete in slow, shallow sheets, not dripping anymore, moving, as if disturbed by something passing through it. The inspector looked at the consultant. There wasn't standing water in that section, he said quietly. Not in 95. The blueprint confirmed it. The only water was supposed to be trapped behind two collapsed joists on the far side of the boiler chamber, a place the recorder should never have reached. The tape rolled on. A metallic thud cracked through the right speaker, the kind produced by a hinge under strain, a hinge that had not been opened in decades. After the thud came another sound, low, resonant, rising for 2 full seconds before cutting off abruptly, like someone forcing air through a narrow vent. The consultant froze the playback. Something on the floor had moved just before the sound ended, a faint crunch, like shifting gravel or shattered tile. He boosted the gain on the left channel. The audio swelled, pushing the deck's limits, and beneath the distortion, a single detail emerged. A voice, very faint, not a whisper, not a shout, just one word spoken clearly, close to the recorder, by a person who sounded tired or cold. Wait. The consultant removed his headphones and rewound 10 seconds. "Tell me you heard that," he said. The inspector nodded once, slow and tense. But when they played the segment again, the word wasn't there. The thud, the scrape, the rising vent hiss, all present, but the human voice had vanished. Only a long, hollow rumble remained. The consultant checked the tape spools, the magnetic path, the heads, everything. No sign of stretching or demagnetization, no jam, no damage. Yet a full human word had disappeared. He pressed play once more, almost reluctantly. This time, at the 90-second mark, something new surfaced. A fluttering distortion that rose and fell as though brushing past the mic. Not wind, not static, more like movement in a confined space, very quick, very deliberate. The inspector leaned forward. "Did you hear that shift in resonance? That's not a hallway. That's a larger chamber." "No chamber on the blueprint," the consultant replied. They both stared at the speaker as the deck continued to whir, the tape inching through the machine, the building quietly humming around them. Then, right before the 2-minute mark, the recorder seemed to be set down on the floor. A soft plastic knock, a brief scrape, and then the unmistakable sound of footsteps moving away from the mic. Slow, careful, dragging through shallow water, and after 5 steps, the faint tap of something small dropping beside the recorder. A key. The key lay on the consultant's desk under an LED lamp, its edges catching faint bluish reflections. The metal was clean. Too clean for something supposedly retrieved from a basement that hadn't seen air since the mid-90s. No rust. No dust packed into the grooves. Only a shallow scratch along one side, as if it had been dragged across concrete minutes before being recorded. The retired inspector recognized the cut pattern first. "District maintenance issue key," he said. "Last issued in 94. The cabinet holding that key set had been inventoried after the boiler collapse. According to records, 1 key was missing but presumed lost during evacuation. The consultant matched the serial number. It was the same one. The missing key from 1994, now sitting in front of them, still slightly warm, as if someone had kept it in their pocket until shortly before placing it beside the cassette recorder. He checked the tape case again. No fingerprints, no smudges, no heat marks, just the same paper towel under it folded sharply like someone had taken time with the corners. The principal entered the room quietly, closing the door behind her. "District wants an incident log," she said. "They're asking who entered the wing last night." "No one entered," the consultant replied. "And this key wasn't in the building yesterday." She stared at the cassette deck, then at the key, then back at the deck. "What's left on the tape?" 17 minutes. She dragged a chair closer without another word. The consultant pressed play. The plastic knock of the recorder hitting the floor came again, followed by the faint shuffle of those dragging footsteps moving away. But now, in the quiet between steps, something else became audible. A rhythmic ticking, distant, metallic, steady. The consultant counted the intervals, roughly 2 per second. Something mechanical, not part of the building's old layout. The inspector leaned toward the speaker, brow tensed. "That's not plumbing, that's a timer or relay. But nothing in that basement ever cycled like that." At the 3-minute mark, water sounds lessened. The footsteps transitioned from shallow splashes to damp concrete. Then a subtle thump, fabric brushing against steel, suggested the person had squeezed through a narrow opening. A door frame maybe, or a breach. But there was no breach on record. The mic picked up breathing again, louder now, faster, and another sound layered beneath it, almost lost under the noise floor. The faint, brittle crackle of an unstable power source. The principal frowned. That sounds electrical. The inspector nodded. That basement had one active breaker left in '95. They shut it off right after the collapse. Nothing down there should be drawing current. The recorder shifted abruptly, as if the person holding it turned sharply toward something behind them. The audio clipped from the sudden motion. Then came a short, muffled exhale, a startled one. The next sound froze all three listeners. A second pair of footsteps, not dragging, not slow. Dry, deliberate, pacing across concrete with a precision that didn't match the first person's movements. The two sound sources were close, too close, yet the walking patterns never overlapped. One moved steadily forward, the other circled lightly, almost testing the space. The consultant increased volume by 2 decibels. A hollow object rolled across the floor in the recording, tapped something metallic, and settled. The mic captured the moment clearly. The inspector stiffened. "That sounded like a flashlight tube," he said. "An old one, aluminum body." The principal swallowed hard. "So the person dropped it?" "No," the inspector answered. "That wasn't a drop. That was a nudge, like someone moved it with their foot." At the 5-minute point, a deep groan resonated through the chamber. Not a voice, a structural groan. Steel under strain, weight shifting where weight should not exist. Fragments of loose concrete trickled down. You could hear them strike standing water somewhere far behind the recorder. The pacing footsteps stopped instantly. Then the mic captured a tiny, unmistakable sound. A key, another key, being inserted into a lock. Slow, careful, turning right, then left, then right again. But the only door in that basement that ever had a keyhole had been sealed behind a solid steel plate since 1995. The key turned a final time. A latch released. Heavy hinges moved. A cold rush of air whistled across the mic, long and hollow, and someone exhaled, close enough that the tape briefly overloaded with breath. The principal covered her mouth. "What door just opened?" No one answered. The tape kept rolling. The breath faded first. Then came the slow, steady hum of empty space, air moving through a volume larger than any marked on the school's blueprint. The consultant leaned forward, adjusting the levels to make sure it wasn't just the recorder's mic compensating for pressure shift. It wasn't. What rose from the speakers was room tone from somewhere wide, hollow, and deep. Concrete dust drifted audibly across the floor. A faint rattle echoed far to the left, too distant to identify. The inspector recognized the echo profile immediately. It was the kind produced by a high ceiling, but the sealed basement ceiling sat barely 7 feet from the old ductwork. At 11 minutes in, the footsteps resumed. Only the original pair, damp and hesitant, the recorder still on the floor behind them. The second set, the precise ones, had vanished as if never there. Each step sloshed softly, tracing a path forward into the newly opened void. After 4 steps, the person paused. You could hear a shift in weight, a boot sole adjusting on uneven concrete. Something dripped from overhead, hitting metal somewhere in the dark. Not a pipe, not a beam. Something hollow. The principal, arms crossed tightly, whispered, "There's no chamber under this school. No expansion, no retrofit, nothing." The inspector didn't respond. He was staring at the waveform as though it might reveal an outline. A scraping sound emerged next, faint, deliberate. It traveled along the right channel, dragging across what sounded like sheet metal. Slow at first, then faster, as though someone or something was pulling a long object across a container. Then a low click tapped against the recorder's casing. The consultant froze the playback, magnified the audio, and replayed that second. It was the same key they had found earlier, brushing lightly against plastic. The exact geometry, the exact metallic ring, as if someone had picked it up again near the recorder, after it was already lying on the consultant's desk hours earlier. He checked the tape case again. The key remained exactly where they'd left it. Cold now, still clean, still impossible. He pressed play. At minute 13, the footsteps quickened. The recorder vibrated against concrete as if someone brushed past it. A small object, maybe fabric or skin, grazed the mic. Then, for the first time, a clearly human sound rose out of the static. A breath held too long, strained, unsteady. And behind it, an intermittent clicking, like a mechanical relay switching without power. Random intervals, inconsistent timing. The inspector's face tightened. "That's cycling hardware," he said. But the basement was stripped after the collapse. Everything down there was decommissioned. "Unless something else was installed," the principal replied. "Installed where?" he shot back. "There's no physical space for this." The tape answered with a sudden burst of noise, a violent shift of air, a metallic slam hitting the chamber from somewhere above, followed by a short, pained grunt. The recorder shook. You could hear gravel skitter as the person stumbled. Something heavy moved toward the mic. Not footsteps. Weight, pressure, a slow displacement of air that pushed low frequencies into the tape's limits. The consultant's hand hovered over pause. The principal grabbed his wrist. Let it play. A faint tapping followed. 3 short contacts with the recorder's casing. Testing it. Locating it. Then a soft scrape like a fingernail or metal edge running across the recorder's plastic grill. The inspector swallowed. "That's close. Inches." The next sound was worse, the recorder being lifted. A hand closing around it, fabric brushing its sides, the motor humming as the perspective shifted upward. The mic picked up the hollow space beneath, revealing depth far greater than any basement floor. Then the movement stopped. Silence held for 5 seconds. A voice finally surfaced. Not distorted, not distant, directly into the mic. "Don't come down here." Male, hoarse, afraid. The principal jerked back from the speaker as if the words were meant for her specifically. The consultant replayed the sentence. It was unmistakably present, clear, urgent. But timestamp metadata inside the tape's oxide layer, checked twice with the DEX analyzer, showed the recording date as February 14, 1995, 30 years before the warning was spoken. The consultant shut off the deck, but the hum in the room didn't fade immediately. It clung to the walls, a faint tremor in the vents, like something mechanical still winding down. The principal stepped back from the table, one hand pressed to her chest, as if expecting another voice to break through the silence. The inspector moved first. He pulled the cassette from the deck and held it to the light. The tape inside looked normal. No snagged reels, no heat warping, no oxide bloom. But the shell had changed. A new scuff along the top edge, fresh. A mark that hadn't been there 10 minutes earlier. "Something handled this," he said quietly. The principal asked the question none of them wanted to voice. "Is that the only tape?" The consultant didn't answer. He checked the break room where the first cassette had appeared. Paper towel still on the table. No footprints, no new objects. But as he turned toward the hallway, he saw a dark shape leaning against the base of the staff mailboxes. Another cassette. No towel. Just placed directly on the floor, angled slightly as if it had slid a few inches after being set down. Its label was handwritten in the same blocky style as the first. This one read, "Basement, 02-15-25, 04-08 a.m., 5 hours old." The inspector reached the cassette first. He picked it up with a fresh glove and tilted it to catch the light. Something rattled inside, very small, metallic, irregular, not tape damage, something foreign in the shell. They took it back to the office. The consultant placed it beside the first. Identical brand, identical pen strokes, identical slight pressure marks on the label where a thumb had held it steady while writing. The principal inhaled sharply. Checked the timestamp inside the oxide layer. The consultant loaded the tape into the analyzer with a steady hand. The deck scanned for embedded signature markers, mic bias, encoded frequency drift, the subtle imperfections of cheap 90s tape stock. The date appeared, February 15, 1995. Same as the blueprint, same as the collapse week, 30 years off. He didn't press play. Instead, he turned the tape over. The screws holding the shell together were wrong, slightly newer, mismatched, the kind used in early 2000s repair kits. Someone had opened this cassette before leaving it. Someone without steady hands. One screw had been stripped. Inside, the rattle sounded again. Metal on plastic. Tiny. Loose. The principal stepped back. "What's inside it?" The inspector fetched a jeweler's screwdriver. He removed each screw carefully, lifting the shell open with a slow, deliberate motion. The tape reels looked normal, but wedged between the right reel and the shell's inner wall was a bent, rust-flaked object no bigger than a thumb. The inspector leaned in. It was a nameplate, thin aluminum, the kind once riveted onto teacher doors. Most of the lettering was scraped away, but 2 characters remained. Room. The consultant stared at it. That basement never had labeled rooms. The inspector set the nameplate on the desk. It did in '94, he said, before they reclassified the lower level as mechanical, before the collapse, before the retrofit that sealed it. The consultant checked the blueprint. No room numbers, no names, no labels, just blank rectangles. The principal's voice dropped to a whisper. "Play the tape." The consultant shook his head, half in fear, half in something closer to recognition. "This isn't just audio," he said. "Someone's sending pieces of that basement up here, pieces that shouldn't exist." The inspector glanced at the door, at the hallway beyond, at the vents vibrating faintly overhead. "What if the basement isn't sealed?" he murmured. "What if it's connected in ways the building never accounted for?" The consultant finally pressed play. A burst of static hit first, sharp, clipped, like the tape had been handled roughly. Then came the same dripping water as before, but faster now, more agitated. Something metallic clattered near the mic. A whispered breath dragged across the grill, and then the voice returned. Same tone, same exhaustion, same distance held tight behind each word. But this time, it said something different. They didn't seal it. They only sealed the entrance. A clang echoed behind him. A scrape, a heavy drag of something across concrete. The voice dropped to a broken whisper. "Check room." The tape cut off mid-syllable. All 3 stared at the speaker until the motor wound to a stop. The consultant reached for the blueprint. The principal grabbed his wrist. "Don't," she said quietly. "Not yet." But the inspector was already unfolding the paper, smoothing it across the desk, eyes scanning every blank room on the unmarked lower level. He circled one rectangle with a pen. A room with no door, no vents, no designation. Just a box, directly beneath the staff mailboxes, and exactly where the second tape had appeared 5 minutes earlier. The HVAC kicked on. A cold draft slid across the floor. Something rattled inside the vents. Too heavy for dust, too slow for loose screws. The consultant stepped back, because whatever was beneath the school wasn't staying beneath anymore.